Welcome to Cecile and Margaret.
Good evening and bienvenidos. My name is Margaret Connors-Aquaid. I'm Deputy Director and Head of Collections of the Hispanic Society. I'm really delighted to welcome everyone this evening to a new series that we're just launched, a seminar with artists, bringing contemporary immigrant artists into dialogue with the Hispanic Society's vast collection. The first 4 seminars in the series have received grants from the New York State Council of the Arts, NYSCA, to produce a new body of work during 2022. And prior to this grant, we also received a grant from the Vilcek Foundation to conduct research with our curators and these artists on the Hispanic Society's collection that relates to these each of these artists' own practices. Today, I have a tremendous pleasure to introduce Artist Research Fellow Cecile Chong. Cecile is a multimedia artist working in painting, sculpture, installation, video, and public art, layering materials, identity, histories, and language. Her work addresses ideas of cultural interactions, interpretations, as well as commonality, human share in our relationships to nature and to one another. Cecile received an MFA from Parsons, the New School for Design in 2008. She has an MA in Education from Hunter and a BA in Studio Art from Queens College. She's currently part of the Elizabeth Foundation for the Arts Studio program. She has received so many fellowships and residences that I don't have time to list all of them because we really want to hear from Cecile. But the most important, of course, is the ones right now working with the Hispanic Society, being NYSCA and Vilcek. Cecile has also a number of solo exhibitions, and her work can be found at El Museo del Barrio, the Museum of Chinese in America, the Center of Book Art, and Citibank Art Advisory. I have to say, it's been such a pleasure to work with Cecile, and I really have discussed with her, this is just the beginning of our collaboration, and I really am delighted to welcome you, Cecile. So the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Margaret. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. Okay. Hello, everyone. I want to thank you all for joining us today. I'm very excited to be here. I would like to thank NYSCA for this amazing grant and opportunity. I also want to thank everyone at the Hispanic Society, especially to Alex Campos, who initiated this the research fellowship, and also to the Vilcek Foundation for supporting this fellowship program, and to Dr. Margaret Connors-Aquaid for moderating and for being with me tonight. I must say that Margaret is the authority in regard to blue and white ware, especially on Talavera Poblana. So Margaret, I consider you my mentor during this research, and I have many slides of you in this presentation. So my proposal for the NYSCA grant was that I am creating a stop-motion animation video, a bilingual stop-motion animation video in English and Spanish, and it's based on this book that was written by Margaret, Talavera Poblana, 4 Centuries of Mexican Ceramic Tradition. It was published in the occasion of an exhibition at the American Society in 1999, and I'm sorry to say that I missed that exhibition. The title of my video is called Conversations in Blue and White. I became fascinated learning about the history of trade, and I want to focus on how this unique Mexican style was influenced by Spanish, Chinese, Muslim, and Italian elements. I'm making this video for all audiences, but especially for younger audience. And I want to make it fun, informative, and also relatable. So my work addresses and celebrates cross-cultural engagement and from a historical, global, and personal perspectives. And I also came to understand that migration is a it's part of a human experience. So I also want to share a little bit about my background. I was born in Ecuador to Chinese parents. The picture on the left, here I am in Quito with my friends, and on the right, I'm the smaller person. We're standing at the equator line in the middle of the world. I like to say that I come from two middle kingdoms. If you translate how China is written in Chinese, it translates to the middle country, middle kingdom, and also Ecuador because of its location on the globe. Here are images of my school experience. I did love school. So elementary school in Quito, middle school in Macau. My sister and I spent 5 years in Macau living with our grandmother. I was there from the age of 10 to 15, and it was also, we lived in Macau, but we spent all the summer vacations and holiday vacations in mainland China, and it was the tail end of the Cultural Revolution. And then at 15, we went back to Ecuador, and my mother enrolled us in this American high school, Colegio Americano de Quito. So I must share, at this point, like I was always kind of learning and forgetting a language between Spanish, Cantonese, Hakka, which is a dialect that my grandparents spoke, and English. And part of my art experience was that I love cucas. Cucas is like what they call paper dolls in Ecuador. I also love to do arts and crafts, especially beading, to bead. And when I was in middle school in Macau, I really loved doing Chinese calligraphy. And I was obsessed with his picture books and picture dictionaries. So here's my earlier encaustic work. Encaustic is a natural material that is beeswax heated with resin. And after many years of living in New York and painted with oil and acrylic, I felt like I was gravitated towards materials, and I was saving materials in my studio. And then when I learned to work with encaustic, I felt that the material really allowed me to layer. So every painting has like 25 layers of encaustic. And then in between each layer, I would add something. I also want to share that there are several common elements to my work. One is that materials in my work become cultural signifiers. Some of the materials are rice paper, volcanic ash from a volcano that erupted outside of Quito, my hometown, circuit boards material to represent how all cultures share technology. And then I also appropriate figures and images from different books, mostly from East and West. And then another element is that I have these little figures on the trees as flowers or fruit, and also on the ground, like rocks. They are really there to represent ideas of tabula rasa, like blank slates, experiencing this cultural encounter. But nowadays, for me, they also represent humanity in general. So I was not looking into blue and white ware for my work, even though this piece at the Art Institute of Chicago really caught my attention. I visited the museum in 2007 when my mom was visiting, and we were visiting my sister. And I usually don't gravitate towards the Asian wings for some reason, but I was with mom. So I said, oh, I'm sure mom would like to see some Asian objects. And then I thought that this piece was maybe from Holland, and I was surprised that the description is actually from China. So it was the Chinese artisans copying the Dutch and copying themselves. So it was like ideas of appropriating the appropriated. And then by that time, around 2013, I would say, I was really thinking about the environment, our relationship to nature. And what are we doing with this plastic? So I started collecting all the plastic that came to my life in a month. And I transformed them into these objects. At the same time, I was thinking about ideas of interpretation, perception. How do we see each other? How do we see these objects? We're quick at judging. We see these blue and white objects, and right away we think that they're from Asia. So I did have a show with them. And then, but meanwhile, I was also an art teacher at a middle school. I taught for many, many years. And the last school was in Sunset Park. I had a lot of students. They were Latinx, mostly from Mexico. Some students from Asia, mostly from China, and a few students from the Middle East. They didn't always get along. And as an art teacher, I really wanted to find an art form that would unify their cultures. So in a way, I was finding a way to combat racism. And so blue and white ware was a really satisfying project where I had, and it was very low maintenance. It was actually blue Sharpies on white paper plates, but it was so effective on all my students claiming blue and white ware as their own, but then also learning and having discussions about migration, about trade, about power, invention, appropriation, taste, but most of all about our human needs, our human experience that we all share. I also had an exhibition with them at the old Stone House in Brooklyn, and it was an exhibition titled Multi-Location. And that was the first and the only time, I must say, that I have shown with my students. In 2019, I had an amazing experience being an artist in residence at 80 White Street. It was part of the Browns Museum, where they gave us a space for half a year. And being in Tribeca, I started thinking about the location, the proximity to Chinatown and Little Italy. And I was wondering what was happening in these crossroads in Lower Manhattan. And I wanted to document blue and white ware in Chinatown, but then there were so little blue and white ware that I could photograph and record. I thought about making a map, but it was really, really not that much to photograph. So I started thinking about the ancient Silk Road and how China had the technology for pottery, and then Persia had the cobalt blue, and then this collaboration in a way moved across the Middle East to Europe, and how it in every place, in every stop, it had its own adaptation. It took a different name, as we know, like Delftware, and to mention a few popular ones. In China also, in Chinese, it's like, in Cantonese, it's Qingfa, which I was very excited to learn that. So it was around that time that I felt that as an artist, I really was going to commit myself to also make my own blue and white paintings. But I say the word commitment because I know that to research blue and white ware was really going to be like researching like a deep ocean, because it is so broad. I feel like more than half of the world has some kind of connection to blue and white ware. So it started by also taking a little bit from here, a little bit from there, and I appropriated also figures from different blue and white ware from different places. At the same time, friends started sharing with me about their experience with blue and white ware. I love how my friend Nikki sent me this image, and she shared that her mother had shared with her how in Eastern Europe, they didn't know what a pomegranate was in the old times. So they transformed the pomegranate pomegranate into an onion. So this one is, it's called the onion blue ceramics. I was also very curious about blue and white ware in my own home, in my mother's house. So I asked my mom if we had any ceramics from Macau, considering our experience of living in Macau. And I remember when my sister and I came back from Macau, we brought little figures, little kunyam, the female deity, but we did not bring any other ceramics. Strangely enough, my mother had this piece that my uncle had brought from Macau to Quito in, I would say, in the 60s. Unfortunately, the piece broke, and I was fascinated to see that my mom had actually tried to glue it together. And this piece from Macau was actually made in Portugal, as you can see. So also this history of, you know, colonialism, it's all in this object. And during the pandemic, so when Alex Campos initiated this wonderful program, and I have already so much interest in blue and white ware, I was sitting still at home, but I have already gotten Margaret's book. I have read a lot about it already. So it was amazing to spend an afternoon with Margaret at the Hispanic Society and seeing the collection straight from the shelves. What a treat. So on the left, Margaret is holding a piece from Alcora, a Manzarina. And on the right, she's holding a plate created by Enrique Luis Mendoza from Puebla, made in Puebla. The piece on the left is from Portugal. The other two images on the right, they're from Puebla. I love seeing the piece, the third piece on the right, the last piece on the right, because that jar later, I feel like close friends with this piece already, because it was in an exhibition at the Hispanic Society, and it already looks so familiar to me, and I love it. These pieces are also from Spain, I believe. The one on the right is lusterware. I love seeing this barril and these pieces from Puebla, and especially I learned that the ceramics in Puebla had used to mix a little bit of clay with the ink. So after the pieces were fired, they would have a little bit of texture, a little bit of bumps. And that was very unique to the ceramics made in Puebla. I also want to mention the contribution of Muslim powders, of this term that I love. It's called horror vacui, and which translates to being afraid of empty spaces. So hence you could see that it looks very, very busy and full. So that was one of the styles that was introduced by Muslim powders. This piece by Enrique Luis Mendoza, he came to Mexico from Spain in 1897, and in a way, he revived the ceramic tradition in Puebla. So you could see that it has a different look that looks more contemporary for those times. And Margaret also sent me this book, Alcora, Nueva York. And I also learned about Alcora being a place of ceramic production in Castellón de la Plana near Valencia. And I read the book during the pandemic at home from cover to cover. And I feel like I became very familiar with the look in a way, and also even the way it might feel, even though I was just looking, I was not touching any of them. So of course, I tried to learn as much as I could from Margaret. I love attending all the tertulias. And this one was one of the tertulias about ceramic traditions in Puebla. This biombo, this screen, showed daily life in Mexico and all the daily events. So right now, right here, we see like bullfights and different types of performances that were happening. So similar scenes were also applied to the ceramic pieces. Here is Margaret presenting the collection of the Hispanic Society at the French Porcelain Society event. And it was interesting for me to learn how potters in Europe, they would also travel from Germany to the Netherlands, or in this case, from Alcora near Valencia to the south of France. This one is an amazing tertulia, chocolateros y manzarinas, the craze for chocolate in the Hispanic world, how this manzarina, which is the top left object, were created for the chocolate consumers. And the shape really helped them not to spill the precious chocolate. And the bottom left is a jicara where the chocolate was poured. And it was really modeled after a small Chinese teacup. So all these cross-cultural influences that I found really fascinating. So time to work on my video and apply for the NISCA grant. And I got in touch with my dear talented friend and collaborator, Michael Paul Brito. And I told him my ideas. I told him that I wanted to record different people reading parts of the book and make a stop motion animation video with some figures. And I was gonna get more figures. And Michael suggested, if you're going to have people read the book, parts of the book, you must ask Margaret to read part of the book. And I said, oh no, she's so busy, I don't want to ask her. But of course, Michael convinced me, and I did ask Margaret. Michael and I, we had worked in a project previously, a piece that I did that was titled Fluency, where it was going to be like a language learning device, like a video, but I really wanted to confuse people. So the writing was actually in Chinese, and the pronunciation that people were repeating was pronounced in Spanish. So I wanted to share the chaotic and funny experience of me growing up in those languages. So when I saw Margaret again, I asked her if she would read from her book. And I also had assigned this very professor looking figure to be Margaret. And Margaret agreed. So that's where I took the photo when Margaret said yes to me. So when I got the grant, right away, I went into start collecting figures. I had nieces and cousins that have been extremely supportive. They lent me their miniatures. I also bought some figures. I found a few on the Stoops and Park Slope. And I was ready to start doing the stop motion animation. I also wanted to honor the place where I grew up. My mom built this house in Quito in 1980, and we moved in 1981, and it's still there. So as I mentioned really briefly, I grew up with a lot of Chinese objects that my friends would actually call my house El Museo Chino, the Chinese museum. So I feel that maybe these objects in my mom's house, maybe for her, there's a sense of longing, perhaps her way to connecting to a place or to a culture or to other generations. And for me, I'm also thinking that I want to archive something, but at the same time, I'm questioning, how do I archive something that is still present, that is still here? So I made this living room kind of with the vibe of my mom's house. Some of the art, actually, I took pictures at my mom's house, and I printed them out, and I put them on the wall. Last month, I was in Quito, and I also took some of my miniatures to create also parts of the video, and also to activate with the blue and white objects that are part of the house. So this is the start of the video. The image on the left is my work table. And then with the image on the right, the video starts with my niece, who's 6 years old, my niece Eloise, asking my mother, "Grandma, why do you have so many Chinese objects in this house?" And my mom answering, "Well, actually, not all these objects are from China." And we start also parts of the book with Margaret talking about tin-glazed techniques from the Spanish potters from Talavera de la Reina, and that technique being brought down to Puebla, Mexico, not long after Puebla was founded, and also how in Talavera Poblana, or Talavera, was a colloquial word, but it was not seen in records until the 1900s. And I also love, of course, the Muslim influence, Horror Bakui, and other elements, and also kind of the influence, a direct influence from Chinese blue and white, and also from Italians, the green, yellow, and orange kind of compositions with animals and nature. This is also kind of, Michael made me realize that I made this kind of like a TED talk where a figure talks in front of the microphone, a character, and then there's an audience that listens. So these characters, they actually take turns explaining what is in the collection, the blue and white ceramics that is in the collection. So the green screen is because the blue and white images will be projected on the back. So here, this character talks about the azulejos that were made in Puebla, and also in the same places where the three-dimensional ceramic pieces were made. And this character, I really like this figure, will share how these tiles with religious elements or religious figures were first part of like architecture of churches, but then later ceramic tiles became more mundane, where you could find indoors and in different places, like even like kitchens. I love seeing this lebrillo, a basin, that is written around the edges, "Soy para lavar los purificadores y no más." So only to wash the purifying ones, so it belonged to a house of worship. I also love the function and form of these jarrones that were to keep medicine, some kind of medicinal herbs, but I love also the function, that white strip, what was left, it was actually to label the content. More jarrones. She will explain about Manila galleon, going from how these huge galleons carried Asian luxury goods from Manila directly to Acapulco in Mexico. And then it will go overland to Veracruz, and then through the Atlantic Ocean to Seville. And some of these objects will also be distributed in other parts of Latin America. So the Manila galleon lasted from 1565 to 1815. I love how this object, I learned that it was done in two separate parts that were later put together. And this piece that is so many people's favorite, including me, that is really like it's like a hybrid piece of so many cultures and so many influences. On the right, you actually see an image of a chariot without the horse, but you will see someone sitting here with an umbrella. And then on the left side, you see this scene of like a bullfighter. And this piece was attributed to Damian Hernandez, one of the head potters. in Puebla. I also like to share. So I was really excited to hear about bullfights. And this time when I went in to see the collection, I was going to see a Damascene piece with my artist fellow, Esperanza Cortez, and Dr. Noemi Espinosa actually had this set of traje de luces, this bullfight outfit from the Hispanic Society collection laid out on the table. And I got so excited. I got triggered because in Quito, I actually grew up going to bullfights during Las Fiestas de Quito in December for celebrating Quito independence. But I have not talked about bullfights to anyone in so long. So last month when I was in Quito, I actually went to visit the bullfight ring. That brought me back many memories as when I was a child. And I also found during the pandemic, I found this picture of me and a friend at a bullfight ring watching a corrida in Acapulco, Mexico during spring break. Here's the image of the picador in real life. They come out at the beginning of the corrida, and they poke the bull with a sharp tool to get it going. So I did this. I put a montage in the video with all these images and some sound that I found from old corridas. In Quito, we don't have, due to animal rights, we do not have corridas, bullfight corridas anymore. So it becomes like think of the past. And now this piece that is a crane, that is a symbol of longevity for Taoist. And here it is instead of sitting on a pine tree, it is sitting on a nopal cactus, which is a symbol of the Aztec Empire. So I love that that entanglement and that hybridity of images. Also Italian influence with this one is called Obo Polychrome. And this one is called Ponche Azul. I also love how when blue and white ware went out of fashion, I understood that Puebla potters continued to make ceramics. And this one was actually influenced by a typical candy from Puebla that had this blue ponche color. Other objects that I saw from the collection, I saw this mantón de Manila with ivory faces, which was an incredible experience. And I really want to thank Anya Andreva for showing it to me twice, because I realized the first time that I didn't have enough of it, so I had to go back. So it had 4 sections. We're also trying to find out if it was about the 4 seasons, but it was not. Andrea actually discovered that the patterns are repeated, but cross, like on the other side, like 2 sides like that and 2 sides like that. They're very similar. And it's amazing because they're embroidered on both sides. And after being embroidered on the faces, all the figures have these ivory faces attached on the face. And what is also fascinating is that the embroidery is done on both sides. So Anya, I love hearing Anya's discoveries, and Anya also found out that these mantones, or that is part of her knowledge, the mantones have the world side facing out and the body side. So the body side, some of the pigments were already worn. It was also interesting that the manton has like a cigarette burn mark. So there was a person who wore it. So it did belong to someone's life. so that also inspired me to go back and revisit Chinese folk designs and to find out what these animals, what these plants really mean in that mantong. Other things that I saw that became interested was the Pancho Fierro. Pancho Fierro was from Peru. In a way, he documented Peruvians in Lima, everyday Peruvians. He painted people that he knew, especially with a focus on Afro-Peruvians. I also love how the curator, Marcus Berg, also talked about mujeres tapadas, which was an influence of Muslim tradition that ended up in Peru, where women were covering their bodies but leaving one eye revealed. And because they were covered, somehow they came up with making parts of their bodies become shapely in other forms. So I found that extremely interesting. It has always been a lot of fun visiting the Hispanic Society, and I love to share my experience. Here we were greeted by Juan de Pareja in one of our visits to Anya's studio. And here is Dr. Noemi Espinosa trying on a mantong. She didn't really do the flamenco part, but it was a lot of fun seeing her demonstrate the mantong. More fun. There's Alex and Marcus. Yeah. Has been a great time, a great experience. And now, before I end, I just want to share what is upcoming in my practice. I recently, this show already opened at the Hearst Foundation, and it's part of Art Now 2023. I'm very excited to be sharing these 4 large paintings with Kate's Ferry projects. I'm also very excited to be an artist in residence next year at Dieudonné, and I would have the opportunity to learn how to make handmade paper. So I'm very excited. And last but not least, I've also flirted with making ceramics. Of course, after studying and learning about blue and white ware, I want to make my own pieces. So this was a quick experience at Dough Clay, this wonderful clay studio in Koreatown here in New York. Yeah, but I'm definitely planning to go back and make more. And also I'm looking forward to visit Puebla. So I hope Margaret would also give me some suggestions of places and potters to visit. And my video will be up on my website at the end of the year. So these are just the screenshots that I have shared with you all. But please visit my website. And again, I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. So I'm going to stop sharing.
So thank you, Cecile. This is just amazing. I feel like I've learned so much from you, and I'm so flattered, you know, I feel like we're mentors to each other. I've really learned so much about the pieces that I've studied, but you bring new perspective to them. And I really just want to thank you. It's really been such a privilege to work with you and to see all this work that you've put together and that you put that really helps you in your artistic process in creating these works is really just enlightening to me. And it's such an inspiration. And I really just want to comment that I think it's so interesting how you not only are inspired by the visual works, but their history. And I love particularly that one room, you recreated your mother's living room, because you bring so much of your own living experience to your art, but also kind of your art here. You have a recreation of the living room with all the pieces, because these pieces that we, they all impact us, and they are part of our, our own personal experience and your experience. And I just really am taken by that. So just want to say thank you, and I'm so flattered to be featured in your stop motion. I'm really can't wait to see how it comes out. I think we all are. We'll have to have you come back. So I have a few questions. Gee, I don't know where to begin. First, I just would love to hear just very briefly what inspired you, to come to the Hispanic Society. I mean, you've done work all over the world, and clearly you learned a lot. I think the blue and white, but I just would love to hear, and I think others would love to hear about why the Hispanic Society. Why was it a good place for you at this moment in your career?
Yeah, thank you, Margaret, for all your feedback and comments. Well, that question is loaded. I always feel like, what does the place have to offer, and what do I have to offer, and also how do I connect to the place, right? But the fact that Arthur Huntington gathered and collected objects and art from the Iberian Peninsula and also from its colonies, and my own experience of migration and my own family experience of migration, I was able to connect to the Hispanic Society very deeply. And I have forgotten that I have studied in Spain for a summer through a college of Alcalá de Henares. I studied in Madrid. The whole thing about bullfights, and I also took like flamenco dance when I was little. My mom made me take flamenco dance in Quito when I was 6, and then later I thought, oh, I was not done, so I also took flamenco classes as an adult in New York, but I still feel like that is an unfinished business that I might have to let go. But the objects in the Hispanic Society, I just feel like I connected to them. And I know that there's paintings, sculptures, but something about the objects, like the ceramics, that it felt very different. Not only that all of you guys are so welcoming, that makes it huge. But I think also there are many layers. Like, it's also my own. Lately, I've been kind of like a rebel. I really want to pay attention more to artisans and not just fine art artists. I also want to honor the people that create these objects that were not called fine artists. And when I look back, the indigenous market in Quito, that's the place that was the museum for me growing up. And I was constantly checking out what new materials they were using, what colors they were using. So there's an element of that at the Hispanic Society, looking at the collection of decorative arts. And also there's an element of familiarity that maybe our grandparents had something somewhat similar, or either a reproduction to it. Yeah.
No, I totally agree with you. I mean, I work with these objects, and I always think about whose hands were. I mean, I tend to appreciate objects more when you could see the hand, the fingerprints, and I think that particularly the Puebla material, you can actually see fingerprints on it, and I love that because it really kind of speaks to those who made them, even though we may not know their names. So I 100% join you in that. One thing that I find really striking about your work is that the themes in your art are quite deep. I think that on so many, and they're so complex and so present in what's happening in the world today. And but there's also kind of a quality of quirkiness sometimes, like with the, stop motion. And they're fun. I mean, there's such an element of fun in your work. And I just wondered if you could speak a little bit to that.
Thank you for that question, Margaret. I feel like I don't intend to make it a certain way, but I tend to work very intuitively. And it just calls me to do this with that material and that, and then, and then I just put it together. And once I put it together, it's like, what have I done? And then I have to excavate the meaning and the reason why I made it, So it's like, why am I so obsessed with blue and white ware? Does it reflect my life? Or why? So it's constantly questioning. And sometimes I can't sleep, and I have something that bothers me, and then I have to say, why is this bothering me so much? What is the meaning? What can I do? So with the stop motion animation, I have very limited experience. I have made one video, but at the same time, I'm kind of adventurous. It's like, oh, I'm just gonna do this. And then it's like, oops, this is as far as I can. So there's an element of that as well. So then I get help, Yeah.
Well, I think you're a risk. I mean, I think what I'm amazed, even, you do these wonderful installations, and I can see the risk you're willing to take. I mean, there's no one art that describes you. You've got such a wide range of material that you work with. That's really kind of exciting. And I think to me, it's inspiring for many of us to see the range in which you work, and the fact that you're picking up pottery and already making these, pieces is really, it's terrific. I mean, it shows that you're willing to take on any risk to create your work. Let's see what else. I have a few more questions, but I thought we'd just give an opportunity to our audience. Ryan, we can't see him, but he's with us. Ryan, do we have any questions from the audience?
Sure. The first question from the audience, I think you may have partially answered, referring people to your website. But one person asked, will you be showing the stop motion video? But then also, about the process. They're asking, did you put together a script? Did you storyboard? Or perhaps was it more improvised?
Oh, thank you for the question. Yeah. Last time, the first animation that I did with like a language device, it was so much simpler. But this time I really wanted to honor the content of the book as well. So that's when I decided to do like the TED Talk style of the little stage. But yeah, I had no idea how to start. So I decided to do a storyboard. I gathered information from the book that was the most important to me, and I laid it out. And then I emailed Margaret, who referred me to Noemi, for the images that were in the collection. And then I went to other websites from the other museums, and the images that were for public use, I was able to get them from the internet. And then my storyboard was that I put the images with the information, and then I recorded voices on the side. I have different family members reading different parts. I also had to figure out, which family member could speak what language. Not everyone in my family speaks Spanish or English. So now I'm in the process of working with Michael and matching them together. Also, Michael made me realize that you always start with sound, but I didn't. I actually started by making the stop motion animation. So what I did is that I I expanded or condensed the video by repeating the images, making it longer, to match the sound, to match the voice, the length of the voice. And also, yeah, the person walks up, the character walks up on stage and then turns around and everybody looks up at the screen like a real artist talk. So that is where we're at. Yeah, I hope I was clear about the process. And yes, I would love to show it in different venues, wherever is possible. But yeah, I haven't thought about it yet. I haven't thought about where. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That's fascinating. And then the second question is, you mentioned this idea of the home as a museum, and by extension, your mother as a kind of curator. So the question is asking if you want to maybe expand on this. The question is, why is it important to think about domestic objects that might often kind of blend into the background, or we might not give them a second look, right? So why is it important to think about these kinds of objects in the home?
Yeah, I think that question is very personal for different people and different families, really. But I think the objects that we have at home definitely tells the story of a family or of migration. And because we have, you know, migration is like a natural part of humanity. So it makes me think like what we gather, what we get to keep. I know that my mom was born in Ecuador, and she was 8 when my grandmother was feeling very homesick being in Ecuador from China. So my grandmother was asking my grandfather that if they could go back to China. So they took 5 children that were born in Ecuador to China. But then the year later, the communist regime arrived and they took everything away from them. So they had to turn in everything. And I just feel like my mom has a very different relationship with objects than I do. I'm just, you know, I feel like I can live with a lot less objects. But for her, I think objects have a much more precious meaning. And I feel that growing up with her, I have taken that for granted, that I really didn't appreciate these objects. And I feel like now somehow I'm trying to document them in my work. But if you ask me, would I like to keep those objects? I think most likely my answer would be no. No, so it's kind of conflictive, but I would like to maybe have them documented in my work.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you so much. Margaret, that's it for the audience questions.
Okay, great. Well, I think that's such an interesting, the idea of collecting and how particularly people who are moving around, I think it is such a complex history of collecting and part of collecting. What are those objects and what are the history of those objects? I think is really important. How do we experience these pieces, because they carry such a, you know, their own stories and challenges for all of us. So Cecile, this has just been such an extraordinary pleasure, not only working with you, but hearing kind of the process and how you work and what inspires you and the history and the research. I mean, you've done so much research on these pieces, and I think that's such an important part of your work. I really had no idea how much time and, you know, it's extraordinary. And I really look forward to working with you more, you know, not only on this video, but on so many other things and continuing the conversation. I hope that you come back and talk to us. Maybe we do this again when you finish the video. I think would be really fun, and to talk more about it. I feel like this is just the beginning.
Thanks so much, Margaret.
Yeah, so
and also what I learned and my conclusion so far from this research fellowship, and also for working the video, I just want to quote Naomi Espinosa, who mentioned, it's like, todo es conectado con todo. Everything is connected with everything. And also it was one of the tertulias that it was Alexandra Rodriguez Jack, who quoted the other fellow scholar, Orlando Fernandez Ying, who said that these objects in the collection embody the history of the world in one single object. So I feel like that is so precious to really appreciate that, and also looking at objects in our own lives in a different way. Yeah.
100%. And I'm so glad, one added benefit, I think, that we didn't necessarily appreciate when we first brought you ours, just these shared experiences and how you all interacted with one another. You each shared your work and the material that you're working on. I know other fellows were working in other areas, and I think that really has been a wonderful experience for all of us to see you share your research and your interest and learn new things. So it's really been a great pleasure and privilege, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. So I hope you come back.
Yes.
And so I just close and thank everyone for joining us this evening, and stay tuned for Cecile's motion, as well as her other lots of work that she does. She has a great website with more information, so I encourage you to check it out. And stay tuned for the next seminar that we'll do in December. So please check our website for information on that. So have a good evening, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much. Good night.